What's up, everybody? You're watching JoeBox TV, and we are here to recap the Misfits boxing card that took place on Saturday night with the return of KSI, 2 fights in one night. The first being against a rapper named Swarms, coming in as a late replacement for Alex Wasabi. He was only given 3 weeks of training. I'm still curious as to why they even allowed that to take place, but nevertheless, as expected, KSI makes quick work of Swarms. And secondly, Luis Alvarez Pineda is a pro boxer, albeit 2-4. And I was relatively disappointed with what Pineda brought to the table. I think he took some shots from KSI early that immediately had him on the back foot, particularly the body shots, and from that point on he mentally checked out. Now, going back to the Swarms fight, which kicked off the evening, before the 3-hour or so period of time before KSI's next fight. His first fight against Swarms, it pretty much went the way I expected. I expected KSI to stop him in round 2. I posted my prediction video earlier that Saturday, and I got put out there. I was right on this one. I thought that Swarms would survive the first round just on pure survival mode, and he managed to. I give him credit. I want to give him big respects for coming into the ring and being willing to step in on such short notice with basically no training, only 3 weeks of training. So courage-wise, definitely gotta give him respect. I was somewhat disappointed that someone didn't teach him to throw a punch and maintain balance. It was almost comical the way he would spin around when throwing a shot and literally spin and run to avoid punches. But again, this is the influencer boxing scene. Most of the participants you can't really expect to be on the level of a professional boxer. Having said that, there were some fighters on the card that I thought showed legitimate ability, and we'll get to that. But as it pertains to KSI versus Swarms, KSI did what he needed to do. I thought he could have done a little bit better job of cutting off the ring, but nevertheless, second round stoppage for KSI. Second fight of the night for him against Pineda. Again, I thought Pineda was caught off guard early by the power of KSI. He was moving up in weight, so it doesn't surprise me too much, but I thought that he would put up more of a fight. It seemed very clear early on that he was basically, as a commentator said, in there for a payday. And I take no comfort in saying that, but that genuinely seemed to be the case. KSI came in with the perfect strategy, and ultimately got him out of there in the 3rd round. What was there, 7 knockdowns? I thought it was kind of hilarious the way the referee just let him keep getting up and continuing. Had to have been like 7 knockdowns in 2.5 rounds. It was quite insane. I did think that Pineda had a legitimate case for a couple of those being rabbit punches. They were. But at the same time, there were also plenty of shots, plenty of clean shots that KSI hit him with that clearly weren't rabbit punches. And on top of that, when you're bending over constantly the way that Pineda was, that's going to happen. When you're going up against an aggressive fighter like KSI who loves to throw that overhand right, and you're ducking down, he's going to end up clubbing you over the top, behind the head as you lean down, and I definitely can't put all the blame on KSI for that. Same thing with the kidney punches. He kept turning his back as KSI went to throw to the body, and ultimately KSI just wanted it a lot more. The goal here was for KSI to make a statement to Jake Paul. I'm not sure, given the level of opponents here, if he did that. Having said all of that, Jake Paul hasn't faced the best opposition himself and is still, technically, to this day, yet to fight a pro boxer that had a professional fight coming in. And I gotta give KSI credit for doing what he could to save the event after Alex Wasabi pulled out. It definitely was thinking out of the box and daring to do something great to try and have 2 fights in one night. Again, I think it is worth mentioning these were not technically professional fights. We saw throughout the night there were fighters who were given standing 8 counts. That doesn't happen in a professional match. You can also look on BoxRec and see that these fights are not listed as pro boxing matches. So ultimately, give credit to KSI for going in there and taking care of both of his opponents. Style-wise, I want to break down some of the improvements I saw in KSI's style. I thought that his punch form has improved. I thought that his defense improved. I wasn't overly impressed with his variation of punches. I thought he threw the jab, looping right hand sequence too often. I thought it was a bit predictable. I think he relies a little too heavily on that overhand right, just as he did against Logan Paul a few years ago. Having said that, I can see how the technique has improved in the way that he throws that overhand right, the way he throws some of those leading shots. I need to see more jabs. I need to see more thinking in there, more ring IQ. But at the same time, sometimes when you're fighting lower level opponents, it doesn't always bring the best out of you. So having recapped all that, I think what KSI likely does here is fight Slim Albaher, who had a sensational knockout over FaZe Temper earlier on that card. And if he doesn't fight Slim, he'll probably fight the winner of Nissan Gibb versus Austin McBroom. I think it's more likely that he'll fight the winner of that fight if McBroom wins. I personally feel like he makes easy work of McBroom. I think he pummels McBroom. Same thing with Slim. I was somewhat impressed with Slim in the way he dominated Temper. I actually didn't expect him to beat Temper because I thought that Temper would be more seasoned and more technical. But ultimately, Slim brought a very unorthodox, unconventional style to the table that I don't think Temper was ready for. And give him credit for now being 4-0 in this influencer boxing scene. He may very well have set himself up for a fight with KSI. The guy can definitely talk trash and make the event very interesting, make the pre-fight build-up interesting. I have to mention Deji. I told you guys beforehand, I gotta put this out there. I told you beforehand he'd come through with a victory here. I know a lot of people were counting him out after the 3 losses that he's had to Jake Paul, Benny Hacker, and Alex Wasabi. But I tried to warn you guys, Fuzi's style was going to be tailor-made for him. I think a lot of people were counting Deji out because of the previous conditioning issues that he showed. But ultimately, I think a lot of people overlook his technique. This guy's ability to slip punches, ability to put punches together, and his accuracy. I thought he looked sensational. Deji did. There were moments in that fight where it almost reminded me of Rigondeaux, the way that he was fighting. I know that might sound like a ridiculous comparison, and I'm not saying the skill level is the same in any way, but in terms of the way they fought and some of those flashes of head movement that Deji showed, it really did put me in mind of him. And those southpaw left hands just continuously landed. Fuzi had no answer for it. Give Fuzi much credit for coming in and fighting his heart out, being willing to keep going after taking all those shots, for having a granite chin. Ultimately, Deji was just too seasoned, and I think since the trainer switched, he's really showed improvements. I'd absolutely take him to beat the majority of these other influencer boxer types, like a Bryce Hall, who he called out, or a Joe Weller. So definitely a feel-good moment for KSI and his brother Deji. Ultimately, I thought the best fighter, the best performance on the card actually came from the fighter known as Dean the Great. He looked very poised, very accurate, took his time, and showed some subtleties that you would only typically see from a legitimate professional prospect. I thought the way he put punches together against his opponent was impressive, and he scored a sensational knockout. Give much credit to him for that. Also, I can't help but bring up the man known as Salt Poppy with the first round knockout of Andy Worski. I'm not going to sugarcoat here, it was immediately clear Andy Worski had no business in a boxing ring. He didn't know how to stand, didn't know how to punch properly. I don't know why this fight was allowed to take place, but nevertheless, this guy known as Salt Poppy, he brings a lot of charisma and enthusiasm to the table, and he brings an exciting style, and he's got tremendous power, so you may see him in a big main event on a card like this soon. Finally, I want to talk about the fight between King Kenny and FaZe Sensei. I thought these two had the best technical performances of the night. I thought it was a good, solid chess match in there, and they both displayed very, very much competent boxing ability, and I liked what I saw. I liked the display that these two put on. I personally felt like Sensei should have gotten the decision. I don't think it was the outrageous robbery that a lot of people thought it was. I could have definitely seen a draw. However, I don't see a case for King Kenny having won that fight. I think his reaction to the decision says everything we need to know. Having said all of that, I want to talk about what I absolutely did like about this fight. I thought they both showed good patience, good poise. First and third rounds, I thought Sensei clearly won because of the terrific right hands. He actually got a standing 8 count in round 1 from the right hand that he landed. I thought overall he had the much bigger moments, Sensei did, and landed the much cleaner, harder head-snapping shots with those right hands in particular. And because he had those big moments, he was the only fighter in this fight who generated those type of big moments where someone lands a big head-snapping power shot. And I think that kind of swayed public opinion in thinking that Sensei just ran away with it. I don't think he ran away with it, but I do think he won. Again, first and third rounds were clearly to Sensei. Second round was definitely Kenny. I thought he worked the jab beautifully in the second round. Fourth round, I thought he worked the jab beautifully as well and showed terrific technique, good patience, and faced Sensei, the counterpuncher in this fight, was waiting on the outside looking to land that right hand over the top. But King Kenny didn't overcommit to anything, controlled the range very well, and kept him right on the end of that jab. The thing is, I thought the round was close enough up until the end to where Sensei was able to steal it with a couple of big head-snapping shots, like solid power punches at the end of that fourth round. So therefore, I thought Sensei took that fourth round. I gave him the first, third, and fourth rounds. I can see how a judge could have given Kenny rounds 2 and 4, and it had been a draw. One more note, the commentators during this fight, when Kenny got the standing 8 count in round 1, in amateur boxing, that is not an automatic 10-8 round. That's not automatically a loss of a point if the referee gives them a standing 8 count. And again, I will remind you, these were not professional fights. They are sanctioned by a commission which generally hosts and sanctions kickboxing events and semi-pro boxing events and exhibitions. As it also pertains to this influencer boxing scene, it looks as though Jake Paul is about to square off with Anderson Silva, the MMA legend, at the end of October. Silva is very seasoned in his MMA career, and he has a few pro boxing matches, one of them being against Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., who, despite having never lived up to expectations, being the great Julio Cesar Chavez's son, he is a former world champion, and even though he didn't always put in his best effort or dedicate himself as he should have, is still a legitimate boxer who came away with some solid victories, and Silva in his late 40s was able to pull off the victory. This is probably Jake Paul's toughest test of his career, even against now 47-year-old Silva. I still don't think it meets the expectations that we need to have for Jake Paul at this point. It is a good fight, but it's not quite on the level of a Jake Paul versus Tommy Fury, who's won several fights now and is undefeated, or Hasim Rahman Jr., who's 13-1. Unfortunately, both of those fighters pulled out. I think given that those two fighters pulled out, this is not a bad replacement at all. It's a very interesting fight that'll sell well, I'm sure, and ultimately money talks. So at the end of the day, I will have more on that when it comes to Paul versus Silva. But let me know in the comments section what you thought about this whole Misfits boxing card. Do you think this is good for the sport or bad for the sport? I think ultimately there's more positive than negative as long as the fighters take it seriously, which I think much of these fighters did do, even if there's some that weren't. And another thing that I think is important is that as long as the media doesn't elevate these fights above the championship level pro fights, I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it can actually attract a younger fan base, and I stand by that. Let me know again in the comment section what you thought, what matchups you want to see in the future. And until next time, Joe Box TV out!